Hello and welcome to Marple's Mind, where every story feels like a conversation. Over a warm cup of coffee today, I bring you a brand new Miss Marple mystery, filled with twists, clues, and clever deductions. Make yourself comfortable and let's unravel the case together. And if you'd like, leave a quick comment and tell me where you're joining from. It's always a pleasure to know where our little detective community is tuning in. From now, let's get started. Chapter 1. The Peculiar Invitation. The Morning Post arrived at precisely 9:30, as it had done every day for the past 40 years in the village of St. Mary Mead. Miss Jane Marple set down her knitting needles and adjusted her spectacles as her maid, Cherry, brought in the small silver tray bearing the day's correspondence. "Thank you, Cherry dear," Miss Marple said, her keen blue eyes already scanning the envelopes. Bills, a letter from her nephew Raymond, a circular from the church committee, and then something quite unexpected. The envelope was of expensive cream-coloured paper, heavy and textured beneath her fingers. The address was written in an elegant flowing script that spoke of proper education and careful penmanship. But it was the postmark that made Miss Marple's eyebrows rise ever so slightly. Thornfield, Yorkshire. "Now, that is curious," she murmured, reaching for her letter opener. The letter within was written on matching stationery, embossed with an elaborate crest featuring a thorn bush and a tower. Miss Marple read, "Dear Miss Marple, you do not know me, but I have heard much about your remarkable ability to see through the fog of deception to the truth that lies beneath it. I find myself in desperate need of someone with your particular talents. I am hosting a small gathering at Thornfield Manor from Friday the 15th through Sunday the 17th. I would be deeply honoured if you would attend as my special guest. I realise this invitation comes rather suddenly, but I assure you, the matter is of utmost urgency. Strange things have been happening at Thornfield, things that defy logical explanation. Objects move of their own accord. Sounds echo through the halls at night. My guests and staff speak in whispers of supernatural forces, but I suspect human hands are behind these occurrences. What troubles me most is the growing sense that these events are building towards something terrible. I have enclosed a first-class railway ticket and have arranged for my car to meet you at Thornfield Station. All your expenses will be covered naturally. I pray you will come, Miss Marple. I fear what may happen if these mysteries remain unsolved. Most sincerely, Lady Violet Thornfield." Miss Marple set the letter down thoughtfully. She had indeed heard of the Thornfield family, old money, dating back to the Norman Conquest. The current Lord Thornfield had died some 5 years ago, leaving his young widow to manage the vast estate alone. But why would Lady Thornfield write to her? And what could these strange occurrences be? "Cherry," Miss Marple called, "would you be so kind as to bring me the morning paper? I believe I saw something about Yorkshire in yesterday's edition as well." As Cherry bustled off, Miss Marple examined the train ticket. First class, departing this very Friday, only 3 days hence. The urgency was palpable, almost unseemly in its haste. In her experience, when people of Lady Thornfield's social standing abandoned proper etiquette, it indicated genuine distress. Cherry returned with the newspaper, and Miss Marple found what she was looking for on page 7, a small item about several prominent figures planning to attend a cultural weekend at Thornfield Manor. The names were impressive. Sir Reginald Blackwood, the celebrated artist, Dr. Marcus Pemberton, the archaeologist whose recent Egyptian discoveries had made headlines, and Mr. Harold Fitzgerald, senior partner at Fitzgerald and Associates, one of London's most prestigious banking firms. Quite an illustrious gathering, Miss Marple mused. One wonders what they all have in common. She picked up her knitting again, her fingers working automatically while her mind sorted through the implications. In her experience, when wealthy people gathered in remote country houses and spoke of strange occurrences, murder was often not far behind. The question was, had it already happened, or was it yet to come? "Cherry," she said decisively, "I shall need my travelling case brought down from the attic. It seems I am going to Yorkshire." "Yorkshire, Miss Marple." "But what about the church bazaar on Saturday?" "I'm afraid the church bazaar will have to manage without me this year. When someone fears that something terrible is about to happen, one really ought to try to prevent it, don't you think?" As Cherry went to fetch the travelling case, Miss Marple read the letter once more. One phrase particularly caught her attention. "I suspect human hands are behind these occurrences." It suggested that Lady Thornfield was not given to flights of fancy about the supernatural. A sensible woman, then, despite the Gothic tone of her letter. Miss Marple folded the letter carefully and placed it in her correspondence box. Yorkshire in October would be cold and possibly wet. She would need her warmest clothes and her stoutest shoes. And perhaps, she thought with a slight smile, her sharpest wits as well. For in her considerable experience, country house gatherings with mysterious occurrences rarely ended without someone attempting murder, or worse, succeeding at it. The game, as her nephew Raymond might say, was afoot. Chapter 2. Arrival at Thornfield Manor. The Yorkshire moors stretched endlessly beyond the train window, a tapestry of browns and purples beneath the grey October sky. Miss Marple closed her travelling edition of Tennyson and gathered her belongings as the train began to slow. Thornfield Station was little more than a platform and a small stone building, but a gleaming Rolls-Royce waited beside it, its uniformed chauffeur already moving toward her compartment. "Miss Marple?" The chauffeur, a sturdy man of middle years with kind eyes, took her travelling case. "I'm Henderson, my lady's driver. She sends her apologies for not meeting you personally, but there's been another incident at the manor." "Another incident?" Miss Marple inquired mildly, allowing Henderson to help her into the car's luxurious interior. Henderson's jaw tightened. "Best you hear it from her ladyship, miss. But I will say this. There's not a servant in the house who got a wink of sleep last night." The drive to Thornfield Manor took them through increasingly wild countryside. Ancient stone walls lined the narrow roads, and gnarled trees bent away from the prevailing wind. After 20 minutes, they crested a hill, and Miss Marple had her first view of Thornfield Manor. It was a magnificent example of Tudor architecture, with mullioned windows, twisted chimneys, and walls of weathered stone that seemed to grow from the moorland itself. Yet there was something brooding about it. As if the house held secrets it was reluctant to surrender. As the Rolls-Royce crunched up the gravel drive, Miss Marple noticed a man in tweeds photographing the east wing with intense concentration. An easel stood abandoned on the lawn, its canvas covered despite the dry weather. Near the rose garden, another figure knelt in the dirt, carefully brushing something with archaeological precision. "The other guests have already arrived," Henderson explained, following her gaze. "That's Mr. Blackwood with the camera. He's painting the manor for her ladyship. And Dr. Pemberton there found some old foundations yesterday. Quite excited about it, he was." The great oak door opened before they reached it, revealing a butler of such perfect dignity that he might have stepped from the pages of a society novel. "Miss Marple, welcome to Thornfield Manor. I'm Graves. Her ladyship awaits you in the blue drawing-room." The entrance hall was everything one would expect. Dark panelling, ancestral portraits, and a massive fireplace that could have roasted an ox. Yet Miss Marple noticed modern touches too. New electric lighting discreetly installed, fresh flowers in every alcove, and the subtle scent of quality furniture polish. Someone was taking great care of this old house. Graves led her through a maze of corridors to a cheerful room overlooking the gardens. Despite its name, the blue drawing-room was decorated in soft creams and golds, with only touches of blue in the curtains and cushions. A woman rose from a chair by the window. Lady Thornfield, without doubt. She was younger than Miss Marple had expected, perhaps 35, with prematurely grey streaks in her dark hair, that she wore swept back in an elegant chignon. Her face was striking rather than beautiful, with intelligent hazel eyes that held a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Miss Marple, how good of you to come." Lady Thornfield's handshake was firm, but Miss Marple noticed a slight tremor in her fingers. "I hope your journey wasn't too tiring." "Not at all, my dear. Your chauffeur mentioned another incident." Lady Thornfield's composure cracked slightly. "Last night, at precisely 3 o'clock, every clock in the house began chiming. Not just chiming the hour, you understand, but continuing on and on for nearly 10 minutes. The sound was unnatural, discordant. Several of the maids were quite hysterical." "How very disturbing. And the clocks themselves?" "That's just it. When we examined them this morning, we found that half of them had stopped at different times, and the others were running normally. Our clock specialist can find nothing wrong with any of them." She paused, then added quietly, "Miss Marple, I'm beginning to fear I've invited my guests into danger." Before Miss Marple could respond, the door burst open. A man in his 50s with wild grey hair and paint-stained fingers strode in without ceremony. "Violet, I must speak with you about the light in the library. It's all wrong for— Oh." He stopped short, noticing Miss Marple. "I do apologize. I didn't realize you had company." "Sir Reginald Blackwood, may I present Miss Jane Marple?" Lady Thornfield said, a note of resignation in her voice. "Miss Marple, Sir Reginald is painting a series of the manor's interiors for our upcoming exhibition." "Delighted," Sir Reginald said distractedly, his intense blue eyes already sliding back to Lady Thornfield. "But really, Violet, about that library, perhaps we could discuss it at dinner," Lady Thornfield suggested firmly. "I was just about to show Miss Marple to her room." Sir Reginald departed with obvious reluctance, muttering about Philistines who didn't understand art. Lady Thornfield sighed. "I apologize for Reggie. He's a genius, but his manners leave much to be desired. Shall we go up?" As they climbed the main staircase, Miss Marple studied the family portraits lining the walls. Generations of Thornfields gazed down with the confident expressions of those born to privilege. She noticed that several newer frames stood empty. "My late husband had his portrait removed after his death," Lady Thornfield explained, following her gaze. "He specifically requested it in his will. Rather morbid, I thought. But Harold, Mr. Fitzgerald, our banker, insisted we follow his wishes to the letter." They had reached a pleasant bedroom overlooking the moors. As Lady Thornfield showed her the amenities, Miss Marple ventured, "Your husband's death was unexpected." "A riding accident 5 years ago. He was an excellent horseman, which made it all the more shocking." She paused at the door. "Dinner is at 8, but please join us in the gold drawing-room at 7 for cocktails. I'm eager for you to meet everyone, though I should warn you, they're all rather on edge after last night's disturbance." After Lady Thornfield left, Miss Marple unpacked methodically, her mind already cataloguing what she'd learned. An unexpected death 5 years ago. Strange incidents building in intensity. A house full of nervous guests and terrified servants. And empty portrait frames that suggested someone wanted to erase the past. She moved to the window and observed Doctor. Pemberton, still working in the garden below, now joined by a young man with a notebook. As she watched, Sir Reginald emerged from the house and began gesticulating wildly at them both. Even from this distance, she could see Doctor. Pemberton's irritation. "Interesting," Miss Marple murmured. "Very interesting indeed." Chapter 3. The Midnight Scream. Miss Marple had retired early, pleading fatigue from her journey. Though in truth she wanted time to reflect on the evening's revelations. Dinner had been a tense affair, with undercurrents of hostility barely concealed beneath polite conversation. Sir Reginald had monopolized the conversation with theories about capturing the soul of architecture, while Dr. Pemberton made cutting remarks about amateur dabblers in history. Mr. Fitzgerald, the banker, had eaten in near silence, his pale eyes watchful behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Now, at 1:30, Miss Marple lay wakeful in her bed, listening to the old house settle around her. The wind had risen, rattling the windows and creating odd harmonies in the chimneys. Somewhere in the distance, a door creaked rhythmically as if caught in a draught. She had just begun to doze when the scream shattered the night. It was a sound of pure terror, high and desperate, cutting through the wind like a blade. Miss Marple was out of bed and reaching for her dressing gown before the echo died away. She thrust her feet into slippers, grabbed the small electric torch she always travelled with, and opened her door. The corridor was already filling with confused voices and hurrying footsteps. Lady Thornfield appeared from the master suite, her face white in the dim light. Sir Reginald emerged from his room in a spectacular crimson dressing gown, while Dr. Pemberton stumbled out half-dressed, still pulling on his jacket. "The library," someone shouted. "It came from the library." They rushed down the main staircase in a confused group. Mr. Fitzgerald joined them on the landing, fully dressed despite the hour, which Miss Marple found curious. The butler, Graves, appeared with a lamp, his professional dignity intact despite being in his nightshirt and a hastily donned tailcoat. The library door stood ajar, spilling a wedge of flickering light into the hallway. Lady Thornfield hesitated, then pushed it fully open. The scene within was one of violent chaos. The massive oak reading table lay overturned, its contents scattered across the floor. Books had been pulled from shelves and flung about wildly. The Persian rug was rumpled and askew, and, Miss Marple's sharp eyes noticed immediately, there were dark stains on its pale patterns that looked disturbingly like blood. But most shocking of all was the window. The large casement window that overlooked the rose garden had been smashed outward, its leaded glass hanging in jagged shards. Cold wind poured through the opening, sending papers swirling like autumn leaves. "Dear God," Dr. Pemberton breathed. "What happened here?" "Where's the body?" Sir Reginald asked with unseemly eagerness, craning his neck to see around the overturned table. But there was no awful body. Despite the violence of the scene, despite the blood on the carpet, the room was empty of any victim. "Nobody touch anything," Miss Marple said quietly, but with such authority that everyone stepped back. She moved carefully into the room, her torch beam playing over the destruction. "Graves, please send someone to telephone the police immediately." "Yes, madam." Graves departed with alacrity. "But who screamed?" Lady Thornfield asked, her voice shaking. "That wasn't—" It couldn't have been the wind. Miss Marple knelt carefully beside the bloodstains, not touching but observing closely. The blood was fresh, still glistening wetly in the lamplight. She traced its pattern with her torch, droplets leading from the overturned table to the window, with a larger pool near the shattered glass. "Has anyone checked the grounds?" she asked. Henderson, the chauffeur, appeared in the doorway, dressed and carrying a powerful flashlight. "I'll go, miss. Been out checking the cars when I heard the commotion." "Take someone with you," Miss Marple advised, "and do be careful." As Henderson left, Miss Marple continued her examination. Several books lay open on the floor, their pages torn. She noted the titles: The History of Thornfield Manor, Yorkshire Legends and Folklore, and curiously, The Chemistry of Common Poisons. "Look at this," Dr. Pemberton said suddenly. He was standing by one of the intact bookshelves, pointing to fresh scratches in the wood. "These marks, they look like someone was clawing at the shelves." Sir Reginald had produced a small sketchbook and was rapidly drawing the scene. "The composition is extraordinary," he muttered. "The violence, the chaos. It tells a story of desperate struggle." "Really, Reggie," Lady Thornfield said sharply, "this is hardly the time for your art." Mr. Fitzgerald had remained near the door, his face expressionless. Now he spoke for the first time. "We should make a list of everyone in the house. Account for all the guests and staff." It was a sensible suggestion. Lady Thornfield sent Graves to check on the servants while she confirmed the guests were all present. Miss Marple, meanwhile, made a slow circuit of the room, noting details others might miss. A smear of blood on a brass bookend, a button torn from clothing caught in the carpet fringe, and most intriguingly, a faint smell of almonds beneath the metallic scent of blood. Henderson returned, shaking his head grimly. "No sign of anyone outside, miss, but—" He hesitated. "Yes, there's footprints in the flower bed beneath the window, leading away from the house, but they just stop. Middle of the lawn, they just stop dead." A collective shiver ran through the group. Miss Marple, however, looked thoughtful rather than frightened. Graves reappeared, slightly out of breath. "All staff accounted for, my lady, though several of the maids are quite hysterical. Cook is making tea." He paused. "The police station doesn't answer at this hour. I've left a message with the night operator." "Then we must preserve the scene until morning," Miss Marple said. "I suggest we lock this room and—" She was interrupted by a gasp from Lady Thornfield. "The Thornfield Chronicle!" Everyone turned to look where she pointed. A glass case on the far wall stood open, its lock forced. The case was empty. "What is the Thornfield Chronicle?" Miss Marple asked. "A medieval manuscript," Lady Thornfield explained, her face even paler than before. "It's been in the family for 600 years. It contains the history of the manor, including—" She stopped abruptly. "Including?" Miss Marple prompted gently. "Including the record of a murder that took place in this very room in 1423. A guest who vanished without a trace, leaving only blood and destruction behind." She looked around at the wreckage. "Rather like tonight." The wind gusted through the broken window, extinguishing one of the lamps. In the sudden dimness, the bloodstains seemed to gleam with their own malevolent light. And somewhere in the house, a clock began to chime, though Miss Marple's watch showed it was only 2:17. "I think," she said quietly, "we should all return to our rooms and lock our doors. There will be much to discuss in the morning, but for now, safety must be our primary concern." As they filed out, Miss Marple took one last look at the devastated library. Violence had been done here, certainly. Blood had been shed. But where was the victim? And more puzzling still, who had screamed? She noticed Sir Reginald lingering, still sketching. "Remarkable, isn't it?" he said, not looking up. "How a room can contain such violence, yet reveal so little truth." "Indeed," Miss Marple replied, "though in my experience, Sir Reginald, the truth has a way of revealing itself. We need only know where to look." As she returned to her room, Miss Marple's mind was already working through the possibilities. A missing manuscript, a historical murder, and now a modern crime scene without a victim. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to form a pattern, though she couldn't quite see the complete picture yet. One thing was certain. Morning would bring new revelations. The question was whether they would also bring a body. Chapter 4. The Vanishing Act. The first grey light of dawn was seeping through the curtains when Miss Marple made her way downstairs. She had dressed carefully, choosing a sensible wool dress and sturdy shoes. Experience had taught her that the morning after violence often brought more surprises, and it was best to be prepared. She expected to find the library door still closed and locked, perhaps with a servant standing guard. What she found instead made her stop short in the hallway. The library door stood wide open, revealing a scene of perfect tranquility. Miss Marple blinked, wondering if fatigue was playing tricks with her vision. But no, the library was completely restored. The massive reading table stood in its proper place, polished to a high shine. Books lined the shelves in orderly rows. The Persian rug lay smooth and spotless, without a trace of blood or disturbance. Most astonishing of all, the window was intact. Morning light streamed through its diamond-paned glass, casting cheerful patterns on the floor where violence had reigned just hours before. "Impossible," she breathed, stepping into the room. "My thoughts exactly." Mr. Fitzgerald emerged from behind a bookshelf, making her start. He was impeccably dressed, despite the early hour, his pale eyes studying her reaction. "I couldn't sleep and came down at first light. Found it like this." Miss Marple moved to where the bloodstains had been, kneeling to examine the carpet. It was not merely clean. It appeared to have been recently shampooed, still slightly damp to the touch. The distinctive almond scent she'd noticed was gone, replaced by the sharp smell of cleaning chemicals. "Has anyone else seen this?" she asked. "Not yet. I was debating whether to wake Lady Thornfield when you arrived." He adjusted his spectacles nervously. "Miss Marple, I'm a man of numbers and facts. I don't believe in the supernatural. But this is decidedly unnatural," Miss Marple finished, "though not, I think, supernatural. Tell me, Mr. Fitzgerald, what time did you come down?" 5:30. I often rise early. Habit from my banking days." He paused. "You suspect human intervention?" "I suspect a great deal of planning and effort," Miss Marple replied, examining the window frame. "No trace of broken glass, no new putty or repairs. Either this was a different window entirely, or—" she shook her head. The logistics were staggering. Footsteps in the hallway announced new arrivals. Dr. Pemberton appeared first, followed closely by Sir Reginald. Both men stopped dead at the threshold. "What in blazes?" Dr. Pemberton's archaeological precision deserted him entirely. This can't be the same room." Sir Reginald pushed past him, his artist's eye scanning every detail. "Extraordinary. It's perfect. As if last night never happened." He pulled out his sketchbook, flipping to his drawings from the night before. "Look, I captured the exact position of the overturned table, the scattered books, even the blood patterns. But now someone wants us to doubt our own senses," Miss Marple said quietly. "Lady Thornfield arrived, still in her dressing gown, followed by a visibly shaken Graves. "I don't understand," she said faintly. "How is this possible? We all saw, didn't we all see?" "We saw violence and chaos," Miss Marple confirmed. "We saw blood. We heard a scream that brought us all running. The question is, why would someone go to such elaborate lengths to erase all evidence of it?" "Perhaps," Dr. Pemberton suggested slowly, "because there was no crime. What if this was all an elaborate hoax? With real blood?" Miss Marple shook her head. "I've seen enough blood in my time to recognize the genuine article. Besides, there's the matter of the missing manuscript." Lady Thornfield moved to the glass case on the wall. It was locked, the mechanism showing no signs of forcing. With trembling fingers, she produced a key and opened it. Inside, in pride of place, sat an ancient leather-bound volume. "The Thornfield Chronicle," she whispered. "But it was gone. We all saw the empty case." Miss Marple examined the manuscript without touching it. "May I ask who has keys to this case?" "Only myself and Graves," Lady Thornfield replied. "My husband was very particular about it. I can attest that my key never left my possession," Graves said stiffly, clearly offended by the implication. Sir Reginald was pacing the room like a caged tiger. "This is magnificent! Don't you see? Someone has created the ultimate artistic statement, a crime that erases itself, the temporary nature of violence, the restoration of order." "Oh, do shut up, Reggie," Dr. Pemberton snapped. "This isn't one of your avant-garde exhibitions. Something serious is happening here." "But what?" Mr. Fitzgerald asked. "What's the purpose? If someone staged an elaborate crime scene only to eliminate it, what could they possibly gain?" Miss Marple had moved to the window, studying the garden below. The flower bed Henderson had mentioned showed no signs of disturbance. The earth was smooth and undisturbed, the late roses blooming peacefully. "I believe," she said thoughtfully, "we're being conditioned." "Conditioned?" Lady Thornfield echoed. "Yes. Someone wants us to doubt our own perceptions, to question what we see and hear. The question is why? What future event requires witnesses who no longer trust their own senses?" A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Dr. Pemberton spoke. "You think this is preparation for something worse?" "I fear so," Miss Marple replied. "Last night was a rehearsal. The real performance is yet to come." Lady Thornfield sank into a chair. "Should we call the police? But what would we tell them? That we all witnessed a crime scene that no longer exists?" "They'd think we were mad," Mr. Fitzgerald said flatly, "or playing some elaborate joke." "Which is precisely what someone wants," Miss Marple observed. "Tell me, has anything else unusual happened in the house recently? Before the incidents you mentioned in your letter?" Lady Thornfield hesitated. "Well, there have been small things. Objects moving overnight. Doors found open that were locked. Strange sounds in the walls. But I attributed those to the house settling, or perhaps mice. When did these small things begin? About 2 months ago, just after I announced the exhibition." "Exhibition?" Miss Marple inquired. "A charity exhibition of the manor's art and artifacts, to raise funds for the local hospital. All our weekend guests are involved in some way. Reggie is providing paintings, Dr. Pemberton is lecturing on the archaeological finds, and Harold, Mr. Fitzgerald, is managing the financial aspects." "I see." Miss Marple filed this information away. "And the exhibition is scheduled for next month, November 15th. Sir Reginald had been sketching the restored room with quick, agitated strokes. Now he looked up. "Do you suppose someone is trying to stop the exhibition? Or ensure it never reveals what it's meant to reveal? Dr. Pemberton added darkly. Before anyone could respond, a maid appeared in the doorway, bobbing a curtsy. "Begging your pardon, my lady, but cook says breakfast is served, and—" she hesitated, clearly frightened. "Yes, Mary. Cook says to tell you that the kitchen clock struck 13 this morning. 13 times, my lady, she counted." As if in response to this pronouncement, every clock in the house began to chime in unison. But the sound was wrong, discordant and hollow, as if the bells were cracked. The chiming went on and on, far beyond any reasonable hour, until Lady Thornfield covered her ears. When it finally stopped, Miss Marple checked her watch. 7:15. "I think," she said calmly, "we should all have some breakfast. And then, Lady Thornfield, I would very much like to see the rest of the house, particularly any areas that will be featured in your exhibition." As they filed out of the impossible library, Miss Marple noticed Sir Reginald tear a page from his sketchbook, his drawing of the crime scene, and slip it into his pocket. She also observed Mr. Fitzgerald pause at the door, running his fingers along the frame as if checking for something. The vanishing crime scene was disturbing enough, but Miss Marple had the uncomfortable feeling that it was merely the opening act of a much more sinister play, and somewhere in this house a murderer was waiting for their cue. Chapter 5. Secrets in the Garden. After a subdued breakfast where conversation centred on the impossibility of the previous night's events, Miss Marple excused herself for a walk in the gardens. The morning air was crisp and clean, a welcome relief from the oppressive atmosphere inside the manor. She had noticed during breakfast that several of the party seemed reluctant to meet each other's eyes, and the servants moved about their duties with nervous efficiency. The gardens of Thornfield Manor were extensive and beautifully maintained, despite the lateness of the season. Miss Marple made her way along the gravel paths, ostensibly admiring the late-blooming chrysanthemums and the carefully pruned topiary, but in reality conducting a thorough examination of the grounds. She found what she was looking for near the rose garden, the flower bed beneath the library window that Henderson had mentioned. The earth here was indeed different from the surrounding soil, darker and more recently turned. But it wasn't the disturbed earth that caught her attention, it was the pattern of it. The soil had been carefully raked and smoothed, but Miss Marple's keen eyes detected the faint outline of what might have been footprints, now deliberately obscured. More interesting still was a small depression near the wall, as if something heavy had been placed there temporarily. "Admiring the roses, miss?" Miss Marple turned to find a weathered man in his 60s approaching, a wheelbarrow full of garden tools beside him. His clothes marked him as the head gardener, and his suspicious expression suggested he wasn't pleased to find her examining his handiwork. "They're quite lovely," Miss Marple replied pleasantly. "You must be very proud of them. I'm Miss Marple, Lady Thornfield's guest. I know who you are. I'm Hodges, head gardener these 30 years. He set down his wheelbarrow with unnecessary force. "Heard there was some to do in the house last night." "Indeed there was. I don't suppose you heard anything unusual. A scream, perhaps?" Hodges's weathered face remained impassive. "I sleep sound, miss. Have to, with all the strange goings-on lately. A man needs his rest." "Strange goings-on?" Miss Marple inquired mildly, bending to examine a particularly fine rose bloom. "Lights in the house at all hours, people wandering about the grounds when they ought to be abed, and someone's been digging where they shouldn't." His voice carried a note of genuine anger. "Found holes all over the east lawn last week. Filled them in, I did, but it's not right. 30 years I've tended these gardens and never had such nonsense." Miss Marple straightened, brushing soil from her gloves. "How distressing for you. I don't suppose you saw who was doing the digging. That archaeologist fellow, most like, always poking about with his brushes and measuring sticks. Claims he's looking for old foundations, but I know every inch of these grounds. There's nothing there but good English soil." "Dr. Pemberton has been excavating?" "If you can call it that. More like treasure hunting, if you ask me. And her ladyship encourages it. Says it's for the exhibition." Hodges spat into the flower bed. "Exhibition! In my day, we kept family business private." Miss Marple filed this information away. "The soil here by the library window looks recently disturbed." Hodges's expression became guarded. "Had to replant some bulbs. Rabbits got at them." It was a reasonable explanation, but Miss Marple noticed his hands were trembling slightly as he spoke. She also observed that his boots were caked with a different type of soil, clay rather than the sandy loam of the flower beds. "I see you've been working in different areas of the garden," she commented. "Aye, well, there's always something needs doing." He began loading tools back into his wheelbarrow with jerky, nervous movements. "If you'll excuse me, miss, I've got work to attend to." As Hodges hurried away, Miss Marple noticed he was heading not toward the tool shed, but toward a small gate in the garden wall that led to the moors beyond. Curious, she followed at a discreet distance. The gate opened onto a narrow path that wound through gorse bushes toward a small copse of trees. Miss Marple could see Hodges's figure disappearing among the branches. She waited a few minutes, then followed. The copse concealed a small clearing where someone had been digging extensively. Unlike the neat archaeological excavations Dr. Pemberton might conduct, this was rough work. Several holes of varying depths, with piles of earth and clay scattered about. Some of the holes had been hastily filled in, but had others remained open. Miss Marple examined the scene carefully. The clay soil explained the mud on Hodges's boots, but what was he looking for? And why the secrecy? She knelt beside one of the filled holes and noticed something glinting in the disturbed earth. Carefully, she extracted a small piece of metal, tarnished silver, possibly part of a buckle or ornament. "Miss Marple!" She turned to find Dr. Pemberton, emerging from the trees, his face flushed with exertion and annoyance. "What are you doing here? This is a restricted archaeological site." "I was following the gardener," Miss Marple replied honestly. "He seemed distressed about unauthorized digging, and I was curious to see what he meant." Dr. Pemberton's expression shifted from annoyance to alarm. "Hodges has been here. When? Just now. He seemed quite upset about the excavations." Miss Marple held up the piece of metal. "I found this in one of the filled holes." Dr. Pemberton snatched it from her hand, examining it closely. "Medieval, possibly 14th century. This is exactly what I've been looking for." His excitement was palpable. "Don't you see? This proves my theory about the original manor house." "What theory is that?" "That the current manor isn't the first building on this site. I believe there was an earlier structure, possibly dating to the 13th century. The Thornfield Chronicle mentions it, but the references are cryptic." He pocketed the metal fragment. "If I can prove the existence of the earlier manor, it would revolutionize our understanding of medieval Yorkshire architecture." Miss Marple looked around at the scattered excavations. "And Mr. Hodges has been interfering with your work?" "Someone has. I found several of my carefully marked sites disturbed. Artifacts moved or missing entirely. It's most frustrating." He paused, studying her face. You don't think Hodges is deliberately sabotaging my research?" "I think Mr. Hodges is a frightened man," Miss Marple replied. "The question is, what is he afraid of?" As they made their way back toward the manor, Miss Marple reflected on what she'd learned. The gardener was clearly hiding something, conducting his own secret excavations while interfering with Dr. Pemberton's legitimate research. The archaeologist, meanwhile, was obsessed with proving a theory about an earlier manor house, a theory somehow connected to the mysterious Thornfield Chronicle. And somewhere in this tangle of secrets lay the reason for last night's vanishing crime scene. Miss Marple was beginning to suspect that the past and present were more closely connected at Thornfield Manor than anyone realized. As they approached the house, she noticed Sir Reginald at his easel on the lawn, painting furiously. But he wasn't capturing the manor's architecture. He was painting the rose garden, and specifically the flower bed beneath the library window. Even from a distance, she could see that his canvas showed the earth as it had been the night before, disturbed, with clear footprints leading away from the house. "Dr. Pemberton," she said quietly, "I think we need to have a serious conversation with the other guests. Someone in this house knows far more than they're admitting about last night's events." The archaeologist nodded grimly. "I've been thinking the same thing. The question is, are we dealing with an elaborate hoax or something far more sinister?" Miss Marple watched Sir Reginald add another layer of paint to his disturbing canvas. "In my experience, Dr. Pemberton, when people go to such lengths to manipulate reality, murder is usually not far behind." As if summoned by her words, a scream echoed across the gardens. Not the desperate cry they'd heard the night before, but a sharp exclamation of shock. It came from the direction of the manor's east wing, where Lady Thornfield had mentioned the servants' quarters were located. Miss Marple and Dr. Pemberton exchanged glances and hurried toward the sound. Whatever was happening at Thornfield Manor, Miss Marple had the distinct feeling that the real drama was only just beginning. Chapter 6. The Artist's Canvas. The scream had come from Mary, the young maid who had announced the kitchen clock's peculiar behaviour at breakfast. Miss Marple and Dr. Pemberton found her standing in the doorway of what appeared to be a storage room in the east wing, her face white with shock and her hands pressed to her mouth. "What is it, child?" Miss Marple asked gently, placing a comforting hand on the girl's shoulder. "In there, miss," Mary whispered, pointing into the room. "I was looking for extra linens, and I found— oh, miss, it's horrible!" Miss Marple peered into the storage room. At first glance, it appeared ordinary enough. Shelves lined with household supplies, old furniture covered in dust sheets, and stacks of paintings leaning against the walls. But then she saw what had frightened Mary. Propped against the far wall was a large canvas, and painted upon it was the library as they had seen it the night before, in perfect, horrifying detail. The overturned table, the scattered books, the bloodstains on the carpet, even the shattered window were all captured with photographic precision. But most disturbing of all was a figure painted in the shadows near the bookshelf. A dark silhouette that seemed to be watching the destruction with malevolent satisfaction. "Sir Reginald's work?" Dr. Pemberton asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Miss Marple examined the painting more closely. The style was unmistakably Sir Reginald's, but there was something different about this canvas, something urgent and almost frantic in the brushstrokes. And the figure in the shadows. She was certain it hadn't been visible in the actual library the night before. "Mary," she said kindly, "when did you last clean this room?" "Yesterday morning, miss." "I'm sure this painting wasn't here then." I would have noticed something so dreadful." "Of course you would have. Now run along, and don't mention this to anyone just yet. Dr. Pemberton and I will handle this." After the maid left, Miss Marple and Dr. Pemberton examined the painting in silence. The level of detail was extraordinary. Every book title was legible, every bloodstain precisely positioned. It was as if Sir Reginald had painted from a photograph rather than memory. "This is impossible," Dr. Pemberton muttered. "Even if he started painting the moment we left the library last night, he couldn't have completed something this detailed by morning. It would take days, possibly weeks." Miss Marple noticed something else troubling. "Look at the timestamp in the corner." In small, neat letters in the bottom right corner was written, "The Library, October 14th, 1925, 2:17 a.m. "But that's tonight's date," Dr. Pemberton said, confused. "And the exact time we found the scene." "Precisely, which means either Sir Reginald is remarkably prescient or—" Miss Marple paused, studying the shadowy figure in the painting. "Or this painting was completed before last night's incident occurred." The implications hung heavy in the air between them. If the painting predated the crime scene, then someone had planned the entire event in advance, down to the smallest detail. "We need to speak with Sir Reginald immediately," Dr. Pemberton said. They found the artist in the gold drawing room, apparently having abandoned his outdoor easel for the comfort of the house. He was working on a small canvas, painting what appeared to be a portrait, though he quickly covered it with a cloth when they entered. "Ah, the amateur detectives," he said with forced joviality. "Come to interrogate the mad artist, have you?" "Sir Reginald," Miss Marple began diplomatically, "we've found a painting in the storage room that appears to be your work. A painting of the library as it appeared last night." Sir Reginald's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, and finally resignation. "Ah, I wondered when that would surface." "You painted the crime scene before it happened," Dr. Pemberton accused. "How is that possible unless you were involved in staging it?" "Involved? My dear fellow, I was the architect." Sir Reginald threw down his brush with theatrical flair. "The entire thing was my creation, my masterpiece of temporal art." Miss Marple sat down carefully, her mind racing. "You staged the entire scene. The blood, the destruction, everything." "Every detail. Took me weeks to plan and prepare. The blood was theatrical makeup mixed with glycerin, quite convincing, don't you think? The overturned furniture was carefully choreographed. Even the broken window was a masterpiece of illusion, a pre-cut sheet of sugar glass that shattered on cue." "But why?" Dr. Pemberton demanded. "What possible purpose could such an elaborate deception serve?" Sir Reginald's expression grew serious. "Because someone asked me to. Someone who paid me very handsomely to create the perfect crime scene. One that would vanish without a trace, leaving witnesses who would doubt their own senses." Miss Marple felt a chill run down her spine. "Who asked you to do this?" "I don't know." Sir Reginald's admission was barely above a whisper. "The commission came through intermediaries. Anonymous letters, payments left in dead drops. All I knew was that I was to create a scene of violence in the library at precisely 2:17 a.m. on October 14th, complete with sound effects to draw witnesses. Then, at dawn, I was to restore everything to its original state." "The scream?" Miss Marple asked. "A gramophone recording, played through the house's speaking tube system. Quite effective, wasn't it?" Despite the gravity of the situation, Sir Reginald couldn't hide his pride in his work. Dr. Pemberton was pacing angrily. "Do you realize what you've done? You've made us all accomplices to to whatever this is leading up to. That's just it, Sir Reginald said miserably. I don't know what it's leading up to. I thought it was simply an elaborate art installation, a commentary on the nature of reality and perception, but now you realize you've been used, Miss Marple finished. Tell me, Sir Reginald, have you received any further instructions? Yes. This morning, another letter. I'm to create a second scene tonight, in the conservatory this time, but this one. He pulled a crumpled note from his pocket. This one is to include an actual victim. Miss Marple took the note and read it quickly. The instructions were precise and chilling. Phase 2. Conservatory, 11:47 p.m. Real blood this time. The banker will suffice. Mr. Fitzgerald, Dr. Pemberton breathed. Someone intends to murder Harold Fitzgerald. And use my artistic skills to cover it up, Sir Reginald added, his face pale. They want me to stage another vanishing crime scene, but this time to conceal an actual murder. Miss Marple folded the note carefully. Sir Reginald, you must understand that you're now an accessory to attempted murder. We need to contact the police immediately. But who would believe us? After last night's performance, we'd sound like madmen. Sir Reginald slumped in his chair. I've been played for a fool, haven't I? We all have, Miss Marple replied grimly. But now we have the advantage of knowing what's planned. The question is, can we prevent it? She looked at the covered canvas Sir Reginald had been working on. May I see what you were painting when we arrived? Reluctantly, Sir Reginald pulled away the cloth. The portrait showed Mr. Fitzgerald, but not as he appeared in life. This was Fitzgerald as a corpse, his pale eyes staring sightlessly, his face bearing the unmistakable marks of violence. Another commission? Miss Marple asked quietly. Sir Reginald nodded miserably. I was told to paint his death portrait in advance, for the exhibition, they said, a memorial piece. He looked up at them with haunted eyes. What kind of monster plans a murder like this? And why involve me in such an elaborate charade? Miss Marple studied the death portrait, noting every detail. Someone who needs witnesses to doubt their own perceptions. Someone who plans to commit murder in front of multiple witnesses and then make the crime disappear. She paused, a terrible thought occurring to her. Sir Reginald, how many more paintings have you been commissioned to create? The artist's face went ashen. 3 more. Lady Thornfield, Dr. Pemberton, and— He swallowed hard. And you, Miss Marple. All death portraits, all for the exhibition. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the mantel clock. Miss Marple realized with crystal clarity that they weren't dealing with a single planned murder, but with a systematic elimination of everyone present at Thornfield Manor. And the killer was using Sir Reginald's artistic talents to create the perfect cover for mass murder. Dr. Pemberton, she said calmly, I think it's time we gathered everyone together and had a very serious conversation about the true purpose of this weekend gathering. Chapter 7. Below Stairs Whispers. Miss Marple had learned long ago that servants often knew more about the secrets of a house than its owners ever suspected. While Dr. Pemberton went to gather the other guests for an emergency meeting, she made her way to the servants' hall, where she hoped to find answers to the questions that were multiplying by the hour. The servants' hall was a comfortable room below stairs, warmed by a large fireplace and furnished with well-worn but sturdy furniture. She found cook, a formidable woman in her 50s, directing the preparation of afternoon tea while keeping a watchful eye on the younger maids, who were clearly still shaken by the morning's events. Begging your pardon, miss, cook said, wiping her hands on her apron, but you shouldn't be down here. If there's anything you need, you should ring for Graves. Actually, I was hoping to speak with you and the other staff, Miss Marple said gently. I believe you may be able to help me understand what's been happening in this house. Cook's expression softened slightly. You're the lady who's supposed to help with the strange goings-on, aren't you? Well, I suppose there's no harm in talking. Mary, fetch some tea for Miss Marple. As the young maid bustled about with cups and saucers, Miss Marple settled into a chair by the fire. I understand there have been unusual incidents for some time now. Things moving, doors found open, strange sounds. Aye, that there. Have, Cook confirmed, settling her considerable bulk into the chair opposite. Started about 2 months ago, just after her ladyship announced that exhibition business. At first we thought it was just the house settling. These old places do creak and groan something fierce. But then things started disappearing. What sort of things? Keys mostly. The key to the wine cellar went missing for 3 days, then turned up in the flower bin. The key to his lordship's old study, the one that's been locked since he died, vanished completely. Had to have a new one made. Cook lowered her voice. And there's been people in the house at night. People who shouldn't be here. Miss Marple leaned forward with interest. You've seen intruders? Not seen exactly, but heard. Footsteps in the corridors when all of the family's abed. Doors opening and closing. And twice now, I've come down early to start the bread and found muddy footprints in the kitchen that weren't there when I left the night before. Mary, who had been listening while she prepared the tea, spoke up nervously. Tell her about the letters, Cook. Letters? Miss Marple inquired. Cook shot Mary a warning look, but the girl had already spoken. There's been letters coming for some of the staff, anonymous-like, offering money for information about the house, about her ladyship's plans for the exhibition. What sort of information? Floor plans, schedules, details about the artifacts that'll be displayed. Someone's been very interested in the security arrangements. Cook accepted a cup of tea from Mary with a nod of thanks. Most of the staff threw the letters away, but not everyone? Cook's silence was answer enough. Miss Marple sipped her tea thoughtfully. Has anyone actually provided this information? I couldn't say for certain, Cook replied carefully. But there's been some as have come into money recently. New clothes, talking about visiting family they haven't seen in years. Makes you wonder. Miss Marple filed this information away. Someone had been systematically gathering intelligence about Thornfield Manor for months, preparing for whatever was planned to happen this weekend. Tell me about the night his lordship died. Were there any unusual circumstances? Cook's face darkened. That was a black day indeed. His lordship was a fine horseman, miss. Been riding since he was a boy. The idea that he'd take a fall from old Bucephalus. She shook her head. That horse was gentle as a lamb. You don't believe it was an accident. I don't know what to believe. But I'll tell you this, there was someone else in the stables that morning. Someone who shouldn't have been there. Who? That's just it. Nobody saw who it was. But the stable boy found fresh cigarette ends in the hay, and his lordship didn't smoke. Never touched tobacco in his life. Mary had been growing increasingly agitated during this conversation. Now she burst out, Tell her about the room, Cook. Tell her about his lordship's study. Cook sighed heavily. The child's right. There's something you should know about his lordship's private study. The one that's been locked since he died. What about it? Her ladyship had us clean it out last month, in preparation for the exhibition. Said she wanted to display some of his lordship's papers and artifacts, but when we opened it... Cook paused, clearly troubled by the memory. Yes, it had already been cleaned out, completely. Not a paper left, not a book on the shelves. Even the safe behind the portrait had been opened and emptied. But her ladyship swore she'd never given anyone permission to enter that room. Miss Marple felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to click into place. Was anything taken from the rest of the house around the same time? Funny you should ask. Several items went missing from the library. Old books, some family documents. Her ladyship reported it to the police, but they said it was probably just misplaced items. No signs of forced entry, you see. And the Thornfield Chronicle. Was it ever missing? Cook and Mary exchanged glances. Well, Cook said slowly, there was one night about 3 weeks ago when her ladyship was in a terrible state. Said someone had been in the library, that the Chronicle was gone. But when we looked the next morning, there it was in its case, right where it belonged. Just like last night, Mary added in a whisper. Miss Marple set down her teacup. Has anyone new joined the staff recently? Anyone who might have access to keys and knowledge of the house's routines? There's young Tom, the undergardener, Cook said thoughtfully. Started about 6 weeks ago. Hodges hired him without consulting her ladyship, which was unusual. Said the boy needed work and had good references. What do you think of this Tom? Keeps to himself mostly. But he's been asking a lot of questions about the house's history, about the old tunnels and passages. Says he's interested in architecture, but it seems odd for a gardener. Old tunnels? Oh yes, miss. This house is riddled with them. Built during the Civil War, they were when the family needed to hide from Cromwell's soldiers. Most of them have been sealed up over the years, but some are still passable. His lordship used to explore them as a boy. Miss Marple's mind was racing. Secret passages would explain how someone could move through the house undetected, how crime scenes could be staged and then cleaned up without anyone seeing the perpetrators. Do you know where these passages lead? All over the house, miss. There's entrances in most of the main rooms, hidden behind panels or bookcases, and they connect to the old priest hole in the cellar, which has an exit near the rose garden. The rose garden where Hodges had been so nervous about the disturbed earth. Miss Marple was beginning to see the outline of an elaborate plan that had been months in the making. Cook, she said urgently, I need you to gather all the staff and keep them together this evening. Don't let anyone wander off alone, and don't trust anyone who tries to separate you from the group. I fear there may be more violence before this weekend is over. Cook's face paled. You think someone means to hurt her ladyship? I think someone means to hurt all of us, Miss Marple replied grimly. But forewarned is forearmed. If we're careful and stick together, we may yet prevent a tragedy. As she made her way back upstairs, Miss Marple's mind was working furiously. The pieces were falling into place, months of preparation, inside information from corrupted servants, secret passages for moving unseen through the house, and an elaborate plan to eliminate witnesses by making them doubt their own perceptions. But who was behind it all? And what was the ultimate goal? The exhibition seemed to be the catalyst, but what was so important about displaying the manor's artifacts that someone would kill to prevent it? She found Dr. Pemberton waiting for her in the main hall, his face grim. I've gathered everyone in the gold drawing room, he said, but Miss Marple, there's something else you need to know. Mr. Fitzgerald has disappeared. Miss Marple felt her blood run cold. According to Sir Reginald's instructions, the banker was supposed to be the next victim. If he had already been taken. When was he last seen? About an hour ago. Lady Thornfield said he mentioned wanting to examine some documents in the library, but when I went to fetch him for the meeting, he was nowhere to be found. Miss Marple glanced at the library door, which stood innocently open. Dr. Pemberton, I think we may already be too late. Chapter 8. The Second Disappearance. The gold drawing room felt oppressively small, with the remaining guests gathered in tense silence. Lady Thornfield sat rigidly in her chair, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Sir Reginald paced by the windows like a caged animal, occasionally glancing at his watch with increasing agitation. The absence of Mr. Fitzgerald seemed to loom over them all like a physical presence. We must search the house systematically, Dr. Pemberton was saying. Harold could have fallen ill, or perhaps he's simply lost in one of the corridors. This place is a maze. He's been here before, Lady Thornfield replied quietly. Harold helped settle my husband's estate. He knows the house well. Miss Marple had positioned herself where she could observe everyone's reactions. Lady Thornfield, you mentioned Mr. Fitzgerald wanted to examine some documents. What sort of documents? Financial records mostly. Papers related to the exhibition funding. He said there were some discrepancies he wanted to investigate. She paused, her voice becoming strained. He seemed quite concerned about something, but he wouldn't tell me what. Sir Reginald stopped pacing abruptly. What time is it? Dr. Pemberton consulted his pocket watch. 11:15. 11:15, Sir Reginald repeated, his face pale. According to my instructions, the second scene is supposed to begin at 11:47, in 32 minutes. Then we still have time to find him, Miss Marple said firmly. Dr. Pemberton, you and Lady Thornfield search the upper floors. Sir Reginald and I will take the ground floor and cellars. I should come with you, Lady Thornfield protested. If Harold is in danger, you'll be safer with Dr. Pemberton, Miss Marple interrupted gently but firmly. And we need someone who knows the house's layout to guide the search upstairs. As they prepared to separate, Miss Marple caught Sir Reginald's arm. The conservatory, where exactly is it? East wing, overlooking the rose garden. It's where Lady Thornfield grows her orchids. His voice was barely above a whisper. The instructions were very specific about the location. They split up, and Miss Marple found herself walking through the manor's corridors with a growing sense of urgency. The house seemed different at night. Shadows deeper, sounds more ominous. Every creak of the old timbers made her start. Sir Reginald, she said quietly as they approached the conservatory, I want you to stay behind me. If we find Mr. Fitzgerald, you're not to touch anything or interfere in any way. The conservatory was a beautiful addition to the manor, its glass walls and ceiling allowing moonlight to filter through the exotic plants within. Orchids bloomed in profusion, their delicate petals creating an almost ethereal atmosphere. But as they stepped inside, Miss Marple immediately sensed something was wrong. The air was too still, too quiet. And there was a smell, not the sweet fragrance of flowers, but something metallic and unpleasant. Harold, Sir Reginald called softly. A groan answered them from behind a large display of tropical plants. They hurried toward the sound and found Mr. Fitzgerald lying on the tiled floor, his usually immaculate appearance dishevelled. His glasses lay broken beside him, and there was blood on his forehead. Harold! Sir Reginald started forward, but Miss Marple caught his arm. Wait, she said sharply. Look around first. The conservatory showed clear signs of a struggle. Plant pots were overturned, soil scattered across the floor. A wrought iron chair lay on its side, and several orchid stems had been broken. But most disturbing of all was the pattern of blood drops leading from where Mr. Fitzgerald lay toward the glass doors that opened onto the garden. "Help me," Mr. Fitzgerald whispered, trying to sit up. "Someone attacked me, came from behind." Miss Marple knelt beside him carefully, checking his injuries. The head wound was superficial, but bleeding freely. "Can you tell us what happened?" "I was examining some papers. Found something wrong with the exhibition accounts. Someone's been embezzling funds using false invoices." He winced as he touched his head. "I came here to think, to decide what to do. Then someone struck me from behind." "Did you see who it was?" "No, but—" He paused, his eyes focusing with difficulty. "I heard them moving around after I fell, arranging things, and there was a camera flash, several of them." Miss Marple and Sir Reginald exchanged glances. Someone had been photographing the scene, just as Sir Reginald had painted the library incident in advance. "We need to get you to safety," Miss Marple said, helping Mr. Fitzgerald to his feet. "Can you walk?" "I think so." He leaned heavily on her arm. "But Miss Marple, there's something else. The papers I was examining, they're gone. Someone took them." As they made their way slowly toward the door, Miss Marple noticed Sir Reginald had gone very quiet. She turned to find him staring at something behind them with an expression of horror. "What is it? Look," he whispered, pointing. Miss Marple turned and gasped. The conservatory was transforming before their eyes. The overturned pots were righting themselves, the scattered soil was somehow flowing back into place, and the broken orchid stems were healing. "Impossible," she breathed, but it was happening. Within moments, the conservatory had returned to its pristine state. The blood drops had vanished, the overturned chair stood upright, and the plants bloomed as if nothing had disturbed them. "The same as the library," Sir Reginald said in a shaking voice. "But how? How is this possible?" Mr. Fitzgerald, still leaning on Miss Marple's arm, stared at the restored conservatory in bewilderment. "I don't understand. There was blood, broken plants." "You're injured," Miss Marple said firmly. "That much is real. But someone wants us to doubt what we've seen, just as they did last night." As they reached the door, Miss Marple heard a sound that made her blood run cold, the whir of a movie camera. Someone was filming them, recording their confusion and disbelief. "Run!" she said urgently. They stumbled out of the conservatory and into the corridor, Mr. Fitzgerald supported between Miss Marple and Sir Reginald. Behind them, Miss Marple could hear footsteps, someone following them through the house. "The others," Sir Reginald panted. "We need to find Lady Thornfield and Dr. Pemberton." They made their way toward the main staircase, but as they reached the entrance hall, they found Dr. Pemberton and Lady Thornfield already there, both looking shaken. "Thank God you're safe," Lady Thornfield exclaimed, seeing Mr. Fitzgerald's condition. "We heard sounds from the conservatory, breaking glass, someone crying out." "But when we went to investigate," Dr. Pemberton added, "we found nothing. The conservatory was perfectly normal." Miss Marple felt a chill of realization. "You went to the conservatory?" "When?" "Just now. We heard the disturbance and came running." Lady Thornfield looked confused. "But there was no sign of any struggle. Harold, what happened to you?" Mr. Fitzgerald touched his head wound, gingerly. "I was attacked. There was blood, broken plants. But then everything changed. It was as if time reversed itself." "That's impossible," Dr. Pemberton said flatly. "You must have hit your head harder than you thought." "No," Miss Marple said firmly. Mr. Fitzgerald is telling the truth. We all saw the damage, and we all saw it repair itself. Someone is using technology we don't understand to manipulate our perceptions of reality." Sir Reginald was checking his watch again. It's 11:53, 6 minutes past when the scene was supposed to happen. "Which means," Miss Marple said grimly, "that someone's schedule has been disrupted. They'll be angry about that. And angry people make mistakes." As if summoned by her words, the lights in the entrance hall began to flicker. Then, one by one, they went out entirely, plunging the group into darkness. In the blackness, Miss Marple heard the sound of running footsteps, a door slamming, and then, most chilling of all, the sound of someone laughing. The game, it seemed, was far from over. Chapter 9. The hidden room. The darkness lasted only moments before emergency lighting flickered on, casting eerie shadows throughout the entrance hall. Miss Marple immediately took charge, her voice cutting through the group's frightened murmurs. "Everyone stay together. Sir Reginald, help Mr. Fitzgerald to a chair. Lady Thornfield, do you have candles or oil lamps?" "In the kitchen," Lady Thornfield replied, her voice shaky but controlled. "Graves always keeps emergency supplies. Dr. Pemberton, would you fetch them? And bring Graves and the other servants here. No one should be alone tonight." As Dr. Pemberton hurried away, Miss Marple helped settle Mr. Fitzgerald into a chair near the fireplace. His head wound had stopped bleeding, but he was clearly shaken by the evening's events. "The papers," he said suddenly, gripping Miss Marple's arm. "You must understand what I discovered about the exhibition funding. Someone has been systematically looting the Thornfield estate for months." "What do you mean?" Lady Thornfield asked, moving closer. "False invoices, inflated costs, payments to non-existent contractors. Someone with access to the estate's financial records has been embezzling thousands of pounds." Mr. Fitzgerald's voice grew stronger as he focused on the facts. The exhibition was never meant to raise money for charity. It was a cover for the theft. Miss Marple felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. "And you discovered who was responsible?" "I had my suspicions, but I needed more evidence. That's why I went to the conservatory, to think through the implications before making accusations." He touched his head gingerly. "Someone clearly didn't want me to reach any conclusions." Dr. Pemberton returned with Graves and several of the servants, all carrying candles and looking thoroughly frightened. The butler's usual composure was cracked, and even Cook appeared shaken. "The main electrical panel has been sabotaged," Dr. Pemberton reported. "Someone knew exactly which circuits to disable. Inside knowledge," Miss Marple murmured. "Sir Reginald, those anonymous letters you received, did they ever mention anything about the house's electrical system?" "Actually, yes. One of them included detailed floor plans, including the location of all of the electrical panels and fuse boxes." Sir Reginald's face was pale in the candlelight. "I thought it was just thoroughness, but now we know someone has been planning this for months," Miss Marple finished. "Lady Thornfield, I need to ask you something important. The Thornfield Chronicle. What exactly does it contain about the manor's history?" Lady Thornfield hesitated. "Family records mostly. Births, deaths, marriages. But there are also other things. References to hidden rooms, secret passages, and—" She paused, glancing around at the assembled group. "And?" Miss Marple prompted gently. "And the location of the family treasure. Gold and jewels hidden during the Civil War and never recovered. My husband always said it was just legend, but the chronicle contains very specific directions." The room fell silent, except for the flickering of candles and the wind outside. Miss Marple could see the greed in several faces, the realization that they were sitting in a house that contained a fortune in hidden treasure. That's what this is all about, she said quietly. Not the exhibition, not the charity fundraising. Someone wants that treasure, and they've been systematically eliminating anyone who might interfere. But the Chronicle is locked in its case, Lady Thornfield protested. Only Graves and I have keys. Miss Marple turned to the butler. Graves, when you cleaned out Lord Thornfield's study last month, did you find anything unusual? Any copies of pages from the Chronicle, perhaps? Graves shifted uncomfortably. Well, my lady, there were some papers, photocopies of old documents. I assumed his lordship had made them for research purposes. Where are those papers now? I gave them to young Tom, the under-gardener. He said he was interested in the house's history, and they seemed like harmless copies. Miss Marple felt her heart sink. Tom, who started working here 6 weeks ago. Tom, who's been asking questions about the old tunnels and passages. You think Tom is behind all this? Dr. Pemberton asked. I think Tom is working for whoever is behind this, and I think we need to find those secret passages before he does. Miss Marple turned to Lady Thornfield. The Chronicle mentions specific locations for the hidden rooms. Yes, but the directions are cryptic. Medieval riddles mostly. My husband spent years trying to decipher them. May I see the Chronicle? Lady Thornfield produced her key and opened the glass case. But as she reached for the ancient manuscript, she gasped, It's gone, but we saw it here this morning. The case was indeed empty. In the manuscript's place was a single sheet of modern paper with a typed message. The treasure belongs to those bold enough to claim it. You have until dawn to leave Thornfield Manor, or join the previous lord in his eternal rest. A death threat, Sir Reginald whispered. More than that, Miss Marple said grimly. A confession. Join the previous lord in his eternal rest. That's an admission that Lord Thornfield's death wasn't an accident. Mr. Fitzgerald struggled to his feet. Then we must call the police immediately. With what telephone? Dr. Pemberton asked. The lines were cut when the electricity went out. Miss Marple was studying the threatening note carefully. The paper is expensive, the typing precise. This wasn't written by a gardener or a servant. This was written by someone educated, someone with resources. She looked around at the assembled group, her keen eyes studying each face in the candlelight. Someone who's been planning this for a very long time. Someone who knew Lord Thornfield well enough to arrange his accident. Someone who had access to the house, the financial records, and the family's secrets. You think it's one of us, Lady Thornfield said quietly. I think it's someone who's been playing a very long game, Miss Marple replied. Someone who needed the exhibition as cover for their real purpose, finding and stealing the Thornfield treasure. A sound from above made them all look up. Footsteps in the corridor overhead, moving with purpose towards the library. They're still in the house, Dr. Pemberton whispered. Miss Marple blew out her candle. Then it's time we found those hidden passages ourselves. Lady Thornfield, think carefully. What were the exact words the Chronicle used to describe the location of the secret rooms? Where knowledge sleeps beneath the rose, and shadows dance where no light goes. Lady Thornfield recited, Behind the face of learning's lord lies the path to treasure's hoard. The library, Miss Marple said immediately. Knowledge sleeps, books, the face of learning's lord, a portrait of a scholar or nobleman. The passage entrance is behind a portrait in the library. But someone's up there now, Sir Reginald pointed out. Exactly, Miss Marple replied, a determined glint in her eye, which means we're about to catch our treasure hunter in the act. As they prepared to confront whoever was searching the library above, Miss Marple couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. But sometimes, she reflected, the only way to spring a trap was to step into it deliberately and be ready for whatever emerged from the shadows. The game of cat and mouse was about to reach its climax, and Miss Marple intended to ensure that justice, not greed, would triumph in the end. Chapter 10. Memories of Murder. Armed with candles and whatever makeshift weapons they could find, the group made their way carefully up the main staircase. The footsteps above had ceased, but Miss Marple could sense a presence in the library. Someone moving stealthily among the books and furniture. As they approached the library door, Miss Marple held up her hand for silence. Through the crack beneath the door, she could see the flicker of electric torchlight moving systematically along the walls. Whoever was inside was examining the portraits, just as she had suspected. She pressed her ear to the door and heard the unmistakable sound of something heavy being moved, furniture scraping against the wooden floor. Then came a soft click, followed by the creak of hinges that hadn't been oiled in decades. "They've found it," she whispered to the others. "The hidden passage." Lady Thornfield started forward, but Miss Marple caught her arm. "Wait, let them go through first. We need to know who we're dealing with before we follow." They listened as footsteps echoed from what must be a stone corridor beyond the library wall. The sound grew fainter as the intruder moved deeper into the hidden passages of Thornfield Manor. "Now," Miss Marple said quietly. They entered the library to find chaos once again, but this time it was clearly the result of a deliberate search rather than staged violence. Books had been pulled from shelves, furniture moved aside, and several portraits lay face down on the floor. Behind where a large painting of a Tudor gentleman had hung, a section of the oak panelling stood open, revealing a narrow stone passage that disappeared into darkness. "The first Lord Thornfield," Lady Thornfield said, looking at the displaced portrait. "He built the original manor house in 1423. "The same year as the murder mentioned in the Chronicle," Miss Marple noted. "I suspect that's not a coincidence." Dr. Pemberton was examining the hidden door mechanism. "Ingenious. The entire panel pivots on a central axis. You'd never know it was there unless you knew exactly where to look." "Or unless you had detailed instructions from the Chronicle," Miss Marple added grimly. Sir Reginald peered into the dark passage. "Should we follow them?" "We should," Miss Marple replied, "but carefully. Mr. Fitzgerald, I think you should remain here with some of the servants. Your head injury? Absolutely not," the banker interrupted firmly. "If someone has been embezzling from the estate and murdered Lord Thornfield, I intend to see them brought to justice." Miss Marple studied his determined expression and nodded. "Very well, but we stay together, and no one acts without my signal." They entered the passage single file, their candles casting dancing shadows on the ancient stone walls. The corridor was narrow but well constructed, with a vaulted ceiling that spoke of medieval craftsmanship. The air was stale and cold, carrying the scent of centuries. After about 50 yards, the passage opened into a larger chamber. Miss Marple's candle illuminated carved stone walls, decorated with the Thornfield coat of arms, and what appeared to be a series of historical scenes, but it was the far wall that drew their attention. It was covered with modern additions. Photographs, documents, and maps had been pinned to the ancient stone. Electric lanterns provided bright illumination, and a folding table held an array of tools. Metal detectors, archaeological equipment, and what appeared to be explosives. "Someone's been using this as a base of operations," Dr. Pemberton observed. Miss Marple moved closer to examine the wall display. The photographs showed various rooms of the manor taken from unusual angles that suggested they'd been shot through hidden openings. There were detailed floor plans, including passages and rooms not shown on any official architectural drawings. But most disturbing were the documents pinned beside the photographs: financial records, correspondence, and what appeared to be a detailed timeline spanning several years. "Look at this," Lady Thornfield said, her voice shaking. She was pointing to a photograph of her late husband. It showed Lord Thornfield in the stables on the morning of his death, but he wasn't alone. A figure in the shadows was clearly visible, though their face was obscured. "Someone was there," she whispered. "Someone was watching Harold that morning." Miss Marple studied the photograph carefully. "More than watching, I'm afraid. Look at the timestamp. This was taken just minutes before the accident." Mr. Fitzgerald had found another disturbing item: a detailed dossier on each of the weekend's guests. "They've been investigating all of us," he said grimly. "Financial records, personal histories, even psychological profiles." Planning who to eliminate and in what order, Miss Marple realized. We weren't invited here as guests. We were selected as victims. Sir Reginald was examining a series of sketches pinned to one section of the wall. "These are mine," he said in confusion. "Drawings I made months ago. Studies for paintings I never completed. But how did they get here?" "You were being watched long before you received that first anonymous commission," Miss Marple explained. "Someone studied your work, your techniques, your psychological profile. They chose you specifically because they knew you could be manipulated into creating their elaborate deceptions. A sound from deeper in the passage system made them all freeze. Voices growing closer." Someone was returning, and they weren't alone. "Told you the old woman would be trouble," a man's voice was saying. "Should have eliminated her first." "Patience," replied a second voice. "This one cultured and familiar. Everything must appear natural. Random violence would bring too much attention." Miss Marple felt her blood run cold as she recognized the second speaker. She gestured frantically for the others to extinguish their candles and hide behind the stone pillars that supported the chamber's ceiling. The voices grew clearer as their owners approached the chamber. "The treasure's exactly where the Chronicle said it would be," the first voice continued. "Took us 3 hours to break through the wall, but it's all there. Gold, jewels, enough to set us up for life." "And the loose ends?" asked the familiar voice. "The servants are locked in the cellar. Won't be found until we're long gone." As for the guests, there was a pause. "The old woman's sharper than we expected. She's figured out too much. Then we accelerate the timeline. Make it look like a tragic accident. Gas leak, perhaps, or a fire. The entire weekend party overcome by fumes while exploring the old passages." Miss Marple's mind raced. They were planning to murder everyone and make it look like an accident. But who was the second speaker? The voice was maddeningly familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. The two figures entered the chamber, their electric torches sweeping the walls. Miss Marple pressed herself deeper into the shadows, praying the others would remain hidden. "Check the equipment," the familiar voice ordered. "We'll need the explosives to seal the passages after we're done. Can't leave any evidence of our operation." As one of the figures moved toward the table, his torch beam illuminated his companion's face. Miss Marple had to bite her lip to keep from gasping aloud. The second speaker, the cultured voice giving orders for mass murder, belonged to someone she had trusted completely. Someone who had been playing a role from the very beginning, whose presence at Thornfield Manor was no coincidence. The mastermind behind the elaborate scheme to steal the Thornfield treasure was someone who had been hiding in plain sight, manipulating events with the skill of a master chess player. And now Miss Marple knew exactly who had murdered Lord Thornfield, and why. The question was, could she and the others escape the hidden chamber, alive to expose the truth? Chapter 11. The Archaeologist's Discovery. The familiar voice belonged to Dr. Pemberton. Miss Marple watched in horrified fascination as the archaeologist she had trusted moved efficiently around the chamber, checking equipment and consulting documents with the practiced ease of someone who had been using this space for months. His companion, a rough-looking man she didn't recognize, was clearly a hired accomplice. "The gas canisters are in position throughout the passage system," the stranger reported. "One spark and the whole network will be flooded with carbon monoxide. They'll never know what hit them." "Excellent," Dr. Pemberton replied, his cultured academic tone now carrying a chilling coldness. "And the bodies will be found in a few days, apparently overcome while exploring the medieval passages. A tragic accident during a weekend of historical research." Miss Marple felt Lady Thornfield trembling beside her in the shadows. The realization that one of their own party was the mastermind behind the murders was almost too shocking to process. But the evidence was undeniable. Dr. Pemberton had been orchestrating everything from the beginning. "What about the real treasure?" the accomplice asked. "The gold and jewels from the Civil War?" "Already loaded into the van, Doctor," Pemberton said with satisfaction. 6 centuries of accumulated Thornfield wealth, worth millions on the black market. The Chronicle was remarkably accurate in its directions. "And the old woman? She's been asking too many questions." Dr. Pemberton's laugh was devoid of warmth. "Miss Jane Marple, the famous amateur detective. I must admit, she's been more perceptive than I anticipated, but even she can't solve a mystery when all the witnesses are dead." Miss Marple's mind was working furiously, piecing together the full scope of Dr. Pemberton's plan. His archaeological credentials had given him the perfect cover for months of preparation. His excavations around the manor hadn't been legitimate research. They'd been reconnaissance, mapping the underground passages and locating the hidden treasure chamber. "The exhibition was brilliant cover," the accomplice continued. "Gave you access to the house, the financial records, everything. Indeed. And using Blackwood to create the vanishing crime scenes was inspired. By the time I was ready to eliminate the witnesses, they were already doubting their own perceptions." Dr. Pemberton consulted his watch. "Speaking of which, we should check on our guests. They'll be wondering where I've gone." Miss Marple realized with growing alarm that Dr. Pemberton intended to return to the library and rejoin the group, maintaining his innocent facade while preparing for the final act of his murderous plan. She had to warn the others, but how could she do so without revealing their hiding place? As Dr. Pemberton and his accomplice prepared to leave the chamber, she noticed something that made her heart race with hope. Sir Reginald, hidden behind a pillar on the opposite side of the chamber, was slowly reaching into his jacket. She caught a glimpse of metal. He was carrying something that might serve as a weapon. But before Sir Reginald could act, disaster struck. Mr. Fitzgerald, still suffering from his head injury, lost his balance and knocked over a piece of archaeological equipment. The metallic clang echoed through the stone chamber like a gunshot. Dr. Pemberton spun around, his torch beam sweeping the shadows. "Come out," he said calmly. "All of you. I know you're there." One by one, they emerged from their hiding places. Dr. Pemberton's expression showed no surprise, only mild annoyance at having his timeline disrupted. "How long have you been listening?" he asked conversationally. "Long enough," Miss Marple replied, stepping forward with as much dignity as she could muster. "Long enough to know that you murdered Lord Thornfield and have been planning to kill us all." "Ah, Miss Marple, I was hoping we could avoid this confrontation, but I suppose it was inevitable." Dr. Pemberton's accomplice had produced a gun and was covering the group. "You really are quite remarkable. How much did you deduce?" "More than enough. You've been planning this for years, haven't you? The archaeological credentials, the research into medieval Yorkshire, the careful cultivation of Lady Thornfield's trust. You knew about the treasure from the beginning." "Actually, I discovered it quite by accident," Dr. Pemberton admitted. "I was researching medieval manor houses for a legitimate paper when I came across references to the Thornfield treasure in some obscure church records. The Chronicle confirmed its existence and location." Lady Thornfield found her voice. "You killed my husband for money?" "I killed your husband because he was becoming suspicious. Harold was an intelligent man. He'd begun to notice discrepancies in the estate's financial records. My preliminary excavations required significant funding, you see, and I'd been borrowing from the estate to finance them." "The embezzlement Mr. Fitzgerald discovered," Miss Marple said. "Precisely. Lord Thornfield was getting too close to the truth. The riding accident was regrettable but necessary." Dr. Pemberton's tone was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. "I'd hoped to complete my work and disappear before anyone else became suspicious, but the exhibition provided such a perfect opportunity to eliminate all potential witnesses." Sir Reginald stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "You used me, made me an accomplice to murder." "You were the perfect tool," Dr. Pemberton replied coldly. "Your artistic ego made you easy to manipulate. The vanishing crime scenes were essential to my plan. I needed witnesses who would doubt their own perceptions when the final murders occurred." "But why kill all of us?" Lady Thornfield asked desperately. "You have the treasure. Why not just disappear?" "Because too many people know too much. Miss Marple has already deduced far too much of the truth. Mr. Fitzgerald discovered the financial irregularities, and you, my dear Lady Thornfield, are the only one who could identify the stolen artifacts." Dr. Pemberton shook his head regretfully. "I'm afraid you've all become liabilities." Miss Marple was studying the chamber, looking for any possible escape route. The passage they'd entered through was blocked by Dr. Pemberton's accomplice. But she noticed something else. A draught of air coming from behind one of the wall hangings, suggesting another exit. "There's one thing you haven't considered," she said, trying to keep Dr. Pemberton talking while she worked out a plan. "Oh? And what's that?" "The servants. Cook and the others know we came down here. When we don't return, they'll raise the alarm." Dr. Pemberton smiled coldly. "I'm afraid the servants are no longer in a position to raise any alarms. They're currently locked in the wine cellar, and by morning they'll have succumbed to the same tragic gas leak that will claim your lives." The full scope of his murderous plan was now clear. Dr. Pemberton intended to kill everyone in the house and make it appear to be a terrible accident. By the time the bodies were discovered, he would be long gone with the Thornfield treasure. But Miss Marple had noticed something else. Sir Reginald was positioning himself near the table of equipment, and his hand was moving slowly toward what appeared to be a flare gun among the archaeological tools. "Dr. Pemberton," she said loudly, hoping to cover any sound Sir Reginald might make, "there's something I don't understand. How did you manage the vanishing crime scenes? The technology required seems beyond—" Her words were cut off by a brilliant flash of red light, as Sir Reginald fired the flare gun directly at the wall display. The ancient papers and photographs erupted in flames, and in the confusion that followed, Miss Marple shouted the one word that might save them all. "Run!" Chapter 12. Unmasking the Illusion. The flare's brilliant light temporarily blinded everyone in the chamber, but Miss Marple had been expecting it. She grabbed Lady Thornfield's hand and pulled her toward the wall hanging where she'd felt the draught. Behind the heavy tapestry, her fingers found what she'd hoped for, another passage entrance. "This way!" she called to the others as chaos erupted behind them. Dr. Pemberton was shouting orders to his accomplice while trying to stamp out the flames that were rapidly consuming his carefully assembled evidence. Sir Reginald and Mr. Fitzgerald stumbled after Miss Marple and Lady Thornfield into the narrow secondary passage. "Where does this lead?" Sir Reginald gasped as they hurried through the darkness. "I don't know," Lady Thornfield replied, "but it has to be better than staying with that madman." Behind them, they could hear Dr. Pemberton's voice echoing through the stone corridors. "Find them! They can't have gone far." The passage was even narrower than the first, forcing them to move in single file. Miss Marple led the way, one hand trailing along the wall to guide her in the darkness. The air was fresher here, suggesting they were moving toward an exit. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only minutes, Miss Marple's outstretched hand encountered wood instead of stone. "A door," she whispered. She felt around until she found a heavy iron latch. The door opened with a creak that seemed thunderous in the confined space, revealing the interior of what appeared to be a small cottage. "The gamekeeper's lodge," Lady Thornfield said with relief as they emerged into the moonlit room. "It's been abandoned for years, but there should be a telephone." While Lady Thornfield searched for the phone, Miss Marple moved to the window and peered back toward the manor. She could see lights moving in the windows. Dr. Pemberton and his accomplice were searching the house systematically. "The line's dead," Lady Thornfield reported. "He must have cut all of the telephone connections." "Then we'll have to get to the village ourselves," Miss Marple said. "But first we need to rescue the servants. Dr. Pemberton said they were locked in the wine cellar." "That's suicide," Mr. Fitzgerald protested. "We should get as far away from here as possible and bring back help. By the time we reach the village and return with the police, those poor people will be dead," Miss Marple replied firmly. "Besides, I have a plan." Sir Reginald was examining some old hunting equipment stored in the cottage. "What sort of plan?" "Dr. Pemberton's greatest weapon has been his ability to manipulate reality, to make us doubt what we've seen. But now we know his methods. We can turn his own techniques against him." Miss Marple outlined her strategy quickly. It was dangerous and required precise timing, but it was their only chance to save the servants and expose Dr. Pemberton's crimes. 20 minutes later, they were back in the manor's grounds, approaching the house from different directions. Miss Marple had sent Sir Reginald to create a distraction at the front of the house, while she and the others made their way to the servants' entrance. The wine cellar was in the basement, accessible through the kitchen. As they crept through the darkened corridors, Miss Marple could hear muffled voices from below. The servants were still alive, but for how long? They found the cellar door locked and barricaded. Mr. Fitzgerald and Lady Thornfield worked to remove the obstacles while Miss Marple kept watch. From upstairs came the sound of Sir Reginald's distraction. He was apparently moving furniture around in the library, making enough noise to draw Dr. Pemberton's attention. "Hurry," Miss Marple whispered as they finally got the door open. The servants were huddled in the wine cellar, frightened but unharmed. Cook took charge immediately, organizing the evacuation while Graves helped the younger staff members. "There's gas," one of the maids whispered. "We could smell it coming through the vents." Miss Marple's blood ran cold. Dr. Pemberton had already begun implementing his plan to murder everyone in the house. They had very little time. "Everyone out through the kitchen garden," she ordered. "Get as far from the house as possible and don't look back." As the servants fled into the night, Miss Marple turned to Lady Thornfield and Mr. Fitzgerald. "Now comes the dangerous part. We need to get back to that hidden chamber and destroy Dr. Pemberton's gas distribution system before he can activate it." "But he'll be expecting us," Mr. Fitzgerald pointed out. "Exactly. Which is why we're going to give him what he expects, another vanishing crime scene. But this time, we'll be the ones controlling the illusion." They made their way back through the secret passages, using their knowledge of the house's layout to approach the chamber from an unexpected direction. Miss Marple had found what she was looking for in the gamekeeper's cottage. Old hunting supplies that would serve her purpose perfectly. As they neared the chamber, they could hear Dr. Pemberton's voice, now tinged with frustration and anger. "They can't have gotten far. Search every passage, every room, and prepare the gas release. We're ending this tonight." Miss Marple positioned Lady Thornfield and Mr. Fitzgerald at strategic points in the passage system, then made her way to the chamber entrance. What Dr. Pemberton saw when he turned around was exactly what she wanted him to see. Miss Marple standing alone in the doorway, apparently trapped and defenseless. "Ah, Miss Marple," he said with cold satisfaction. "I was wondering when you'd reappear. Where are the others?" "Safe," she replied calmly. "Far from here and already contacting the police." Dr. Pemberton laughed. "I think not. The telephone lines are cut, the roads are blocked, and my associate is quite skilled at tracking people through these passages. Your friends will be found shortly." "Will they? Are you quite certain of that?" Something in Miss Marple's tone made Dr. Pemberton pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you've been so focused on creating illusions that you've forgotten to watch for them being used against you." Miss Marple smiled. "Tell me, Dr. Pemberton, when did you last actually see your accomplice?" Dr. Pemberton's confidence wavered slightly. "He's searching the upper passages. I spoke with him just minutes ago." "Did you? Or did you hear what you expected to hear?" Miss Marple pulled a small device from her pocket, a hunting call she'd found in the cottage. "Sound carries strangely in these old passages. It's quite easy to make voices seem to come from different directions." As if to demonstrate her point, Mr. Fitzgerald's voice echoed through the chamber from multiple directions simultaneously. "Dr. Pemberton, we have your accomplice. He's been unconscious for the past 20 minutes. Dr. Pemberton spun around, his torch beam searching the shadows frantically. "Impossible!" I heard him. "You heard what we wanted you to hear," Miss Marple said, "just as you made us see what you wanted us to see. The difference is, our illusion serves justice, while yours served only greed." The sound of approaching sirens in the distance made Dr. Pemberton's face go white. "The police! But how?" Lady Thornfield said, stepping into the chamber with Mr. Fitzgerald beside her. "We contacted the authorities an hour ago. They've been surrounding the house while we kept you busy down here." Dr. Pemberton made a desperate lunge for the gas release mechanism, but Sir Reginald emerged from the shadows to block his path. The artist had armed himself with a medieval sword from the Manor's collection, and his face showed grim determination. "It's over, Pemberton," he said. "Your elaborate game ends here." As the police flooded into the chamber, Dr. Pemberton finally seemed to realize that his carefully constructed plan had collapsed completely. The master manipulator had been outmaneuvered by the very people he'd intended to murder. "You don't understand," he said desperately, as the handcuffs clicked into place. "The treasure, it's been hidden for 600 years. It belongs to whoever is clever enough to claim it." "It belongs to the Thornfield family," Miss Marple replied firmly, "and murder is never justified by greed, no matter how cleverly disguised." As Dr. Pemberton was led away, Miss Marple reflected on the case's resolution. The archaeologist's greatest mistake had been underestimating his intended victims. He'd been so focused on manipulating their perceptions that he'd failed to consider they might learn to manipulate his in return. The vanishing murder scenes had been elaborate theatre, but in the end, reality had proven more powerful than any illusion. Chapter 13. The True Crime. Dawn was breaking over the Yorkshire moors as Miss Marple sat in the gold drawing room, watching the police complete their investigation. Dr. Pemberton had been taken away in handcuffs. His accomplice, a man named Jenkins with a long criminal record, had been found unconscious in the upper passages as promised, and the stolen Thornfield treasure had been recovered from a van hidden in the woods. But Miss Marple knew the case wasn't quite finished. There were still loose ends to tie up, questions to answer, and most importantly, the full truth to reveal. Inspector Morrison, a competent man from the Yorkshire Constabulary, had arrived with the dawn and was now taking statements from everyone involved. Lady Thornfield sat pale but composed, still processing the revelation that her husband's death had been murder. Sir Reginald appeared deeply shaken by his unwitting role in the conspiracy, while Mr. Fitzgerald nursed his head wound and reviewed the financial documents that had nearly cost him his life. "Miss Marple," Inspector Morrison said, settling into a chair across from her, "I must say, your telegram was quite extraordinary. Come at once to Thornfield Manor. Multiple murders planned. Bring archaeologist's credentials verification. How did you know to suspect Dr. Pemberton?" Miss Marple set down her teacup thoughtfully. "Several things troubled me from the beginning, Inspector. Dr. Pemberton's knowledge of the house was too detailed for someone who had supposedly only recently begun excavating here. He knew exactly where to find the hidden passages, exactly how the secret mechanisms worked. That suggested months, perhaps years, of preparation. But surely his archaeological background explained his interest in the manor's history. To some extent, yes, but there were inconsistencies. His excavation techniques were sloppy, not the careful, methodical work of a true archaeologist. He was treasure hunting, not conducting legitimate research." Miss Marple paused to gather her thoughts. Then there was his reaction to the vanishing crime scenes. Everyone else was genuinely shocked and confused, but Dr. Pemberton seemed more analytical, as if he were studying our reactions rather than experiencing the mystery himself. Inspector Morrison made notes as she spoke. "And the financial irregularities Mr. Fitzgerald discovered were the key to everything. Dr. Pemberton needed funding for his treasure hunting operation, so he began embezzling from the estate. When Lord Thornfield grew suspicious, he had to be eliminated. The riding accident was carefully planned. Dr. Pemberton knew the family's routines, knew when Lord Thornfield would be alone in the stables." Lady Thornfield spoke up, her voice still shaky. "The cigarette ends Cook mentioned. They must have been Dr. Pemberton's. Harold never smoked." "Precisely. Dr. Pemberton was there that morning. waiting for the right moment to spook the horse and cause what would appear to be a tragic accident. Miss Marple's expression grew grim, but he made one crucial error. He underestimated how long it would take to locate and extract the treasure. What he thought would be a quick operation stretched into years. Which is why he needed the exhibition, Mr. Fitzgerald added, understanding dawning in his eyes. It gave him legitimate access to the house, to the financial records, to everything he needed. And it provided the perfect cover for eliminating witnesses, Miss Marple continued. The vanishing crime scenes were brilliant psychological warfare. By making us doubt our own perceptions, he hoped to ensure that when the real murders occurred, any survivors would be dismissed as hysterical or delusional. Inspector Morrison looked up from his notes. But how did he create those illusions? The library scene, the conservatory, they were completely restored within minutes. Sir Reginald cleared his throat uncomfortably. I'm afraid I was his unwitting accomplice in that. The first scene, the library, was entirely my creation. Theatrical blood, sugar glass for the window, carefully choreographed destruction. I thought I was creating art, but I was actually providing him with the perfect cover for future crimes. And the conservatory scene? That was different, Miss Marple said. Dr. Pemberton attacked Mr. Fitzgerald genuinely, but he had prepared for rapid cleanup. Hidden panels in the walls concealed cleaning supplies and replacement plants. With the help of his accomplice Jenkins, he could restore the scene in minutes while we were fetching help. The movie camera sounds we heard, Lady Thornfield said suddenly. He was documenting everything. For his own protection, I believe. If anyone survived to tell the tale, he wanted evidence that we were all suffering from shared delusions. The photographs and films would have supported a narrative of mass hysteria. Inspector Morrison shook his head in amazement. It's diabolically clever. If you hadn't seen through it, we would all be dead by now, Miss Marple finished quietly. Dr. Pemberton's plan was to eliminate everyone in the house using carbon monoxide gas, then disappear with the treasure. The deaths would have been attributed to a tragic accident, a group of people overcome by fumes while exploring the old passages. But something puzzles me, Mr. Fitzgerald said. Why invite Miss Marple at all? Surely he knew her reputation for solving mysteries. Miss Marple smiled ruefully. I believe that was Lady Thornfield's own initiative, not part of Dr. Pemberton's plan. When she wrote to me about the strange occurrences, she was responding to genuine fear. Fear that Dr. Pemberton had been deliberately cultivating to keep her off balance. You mean the moving objects, the mysterious sounds? All part of his psychological campaign. He needed Lady Thornfield frightened and confused, doubting her own judgment. A terrified woman is less likely to notice financial irregularities or question her trusted advisor's activities. Lady Thornfield looked stricken. I played right into his hands. I was so grateful for his support after Harold's death, so relieved to have someone knowledgeable helping with the estate. You couldn't have known, Miss Marple said gently. Dr. Pemberton spent years building his false identity, establishing his credentials, gaining your trust. He was a master manipulator. Inspector Morrison closed his notebook. Well, thanks to your quick thinking, Miss Marple, we have him dead to rights. Murder, attempted murder, theft, embezzlement. He'll be going away for a very long time. What about the treasure? Sir Reginald asked. The gold and jewels from the Civil War? Will be returned to the Thornfield estate, where it belongs, the inspector replied firmly, though I suspect Lady Thornfield will want to donate much of it to museums rather than keep it hidden away again. Lady Thornfield nodded. Harold always said the family treasures should be shared with the world, not hoarded in secret chambers. Perhaps some good can come from this tragedy after all. As the police finished their work and prepared to leave, Miss Marple found herself alone with Lady Thornfield in the library. The hidden panel had been left open, revealing the entrance to the passages that had nearly become their tomb. "I owe you my life," Lady Thornfield said quietly. "All of our lives. How can I ever thank you?" "By living well," Miss Marple replied. "By honouring your husband's memory and using the family's resources to help others. That's the best revenge against someone like Dr. Pemberton, to prove that goodness and generosity are stronger than greed and murder." Lady Thornfield smiled for the first time since the ordeal began. "The exhibition will go on as planned, but it will be a memorial to Harold and a celebration of the manor's true history. No more secrets, no more hidden treasures. Everything will be open and honest." "I think your husband would approve," Miss Marple said warmly. As she prepared to leave Thornfield Manor, Miss Marple reflected on the case's lessons. Dr. Pemberton had been undone by his own cleverness. His elaborate illusions had been so complex that they'd created opportunities for his intended victims to turn the tables on him. In trying to make them doubt reality, he'd forgotten that reality has a way of asserting itself in the end. The vanishing murder scene had been a masterpiece of deception, but the true crime, the murder of Lord Thornfield and the planned massacre of his guest, had been all too real. Justice, Miss Marple was pleased to note, had a way of making itself visible, no matter how cleverly someone tried to make it disappear. As her train pulled away from Thornfield Station, Miss Marple settled back in her seat with a sense of satisfaction. Another mystery solved, another murderer brought to justice, and another reminder that truth, however well hidden, will always find a way to emerge from the shadows. The case of the vanishing murder scene was closed, but Miss Marple knew that somewhere another mystery was waiting for her keen eyes and sharp mind to unravel. Such was the way of the world, and such was her calling in it.